Well, it's all come to this, hasn't it? Epic Minigames is a place with a plethora of fun minigames. For the most part, it's a place that, in case you couldn't tell, I've poured many hours into and have many fond memories of. For the most part, as much as I love this game, for every minigame you're totally crazy about to the point of spam voting for, there's bound to be one that you just want to get over and done with because you at least care about your missions. Or your wins even. Just some average to mediocre minigames that you're willing to just tolerate. And then there are those minigames, the ones you dread being selected and make you question your life choices for even daring to tolerate them. And possibly make you think, kill me. This whole story began when I uploaded what is now one of my most popular videos, 5 years ago. I then made a follow-up to said video, and now here I am, ready to talk about what I think are the absolute worst. And with 123 minigames currently in game as of writing, there's bound to be at least a few stinkers. And I'm not just gonna talk about minigames in their current state, no, I'm also looking at past versions of minigames. The ones that were rescued from the trash heap and are bearable today but flaccid on release. And just like last time, I'm judging these minigames throughout all 3 server types, because there's bound to be at least one here that's better or worse in one server than the other 2. And obviously, of course, this is all just my opinion, so if you like any of these, good for you, you're not a bad person, we all have our different tastes. Alright, enough stalling, let's get this over with. Team minigames tend to be hit and miss for me. The objectives tend to be fairly mundane, slow-paced, or just not executed well, and the level of teamwork obviously is pretty mixed across the servers. The former 2 points aren't necessarily bad though. On one hand, you've got bangers such as Teamwork Trial and Battleship Skirmish, but on the other hand, you've got annoying slogs such as Marble Madness and Rolling Race. And then there's Clear Side. Now I have very little experience when it comes to volleyball, but in the actual sport, I can rest easy knowing it requires some degree of fitness and above all skill, instead of the perfect positioning on the most sensitive balls ever crafted. What I hate about this minigame is the way the volleyballs react to your Robloxian making contact with them. Players automatically kick the balls in the direction opposite of where they touch them, regardless of which angle they're facing. Or sometimes they just go wherever they want to. To which I ask, why? Why must we put up with such an unintuitive mechanic all these years later? Do they not trust us to be able to kick the balls on command? They pulled it off in Football Fever, so I fail to see how anything remotely similar wouldn't work here. And it's because of this mechanic that you'll be spending most of your time chasing down balls to get in position. Easier said than done when they tend to move across the floor much faster than you can run.
Get over here, bitch!
The arc isn't consistent either. Sometimes the balls clear the net, other times they just slam into it from the same distance. And all of that results in big balls flying everywhere seemingly at random. What kind of volleyball game is this? You don't kick the balls and pray they go where you want them to. Trust me when I say that it's more fun just trying to surf the balls over the net. The most I can say for this minigame and a few others on the list is that at least it feels like you're trying to play a minigame. It's gonna get much worse. While we're on the topic of badly implemented mechanics, the game's overall usage of the splendiferous creature we call the default Roblox physics engine means that some minigames are bound to not work as well as they could, sometimes to the point of making things straight up unbearable. Case in point, Blow Dryer Battle.
9.81 meters per second squared!
Like its team-based cousin Clearside, this minigame suffers from a mechanic that doesn't work well without changing the whole game's physics. And in this case, it's the overreactive hit detection on the blow dryer gusts. Whenever they register a hit, you drift away at an upward angle, and the moment you regain control, you become susceptible to more blasts, often resulting in a trip on blow dryer airlines to your untimely demise. Well, no problem, just stay clear of the chaos, right? Did I forget to mention the range on those bad boys? You'll get hit by stray blasts way too easily, and some players tend to hang out in the far reaches of the arena, so nowhere in the beginning is safe. And also like Clearside, your Robloxian's movement speed combined with the arena size drags down any pace this minigame had, and makes the second half, if you're lucky enough to get that far, feel less like COD blow dryer warfare and more like
Must never run again!
And none of that is helped by the blow dryer's painfully long cooldown time, meaning it's possible for others to catch you off guard. And it's hard to tell when your blow dryer is active because it's usually drowned out by other blow dryers going off, especially in the beginning. And large servers. Good Builderman. The large version is an absolute clusterfuck. In this round, I only survived because of the polls. Yeah, more players are able to win in large servers, sure, but it's still madness. Still, much like Clearside, again, it at least feels like a minigame, compared to some of the later stuff. When you have as many minigames as this game does, it's only inevitable that a few of them are similar in design and concept. You could be speed racing in a box that can barely handle your velocity, or in a colored sphere, or you could be rolling around to avoid a bomb. One thing that remains certain is that they all feel unique in one way or another, without any of them feeling like a poor man's imitation. So can someone please explain Downhill Roll? Now I'm sure plenty of you are surprised to see this former honorable mention suddenly my top 10. Above Clearside even. After I said in the follow-up video that it was the worst of the 3 minigames, I considered this the worst of the dishonorable mentions back then. That title now belongs to Clearside, but this is still a close second. Yeah, I take that back, cause this one easily bugs me the most. Just from the design alone, this minigame is pretty irritating to play. Tell me the last time rolling down a marble course with cramped passages you get pushed out of and other marbles knocking you off course with practically no way to overtake others was ever remotely fun. But really though, it's less about the design of the minigame and more so that it's simply a shittier version of another minigame I like. With other flawed minigames, you can at least fix their problems even if it means altering the entire game's core physics. And even the fundamentally broken ones, which I'll get to later, you can at least birth a totally new minigame, like what they did with Orb Collection. Not that it was bad, it's just that there's no better examples. This one, fix all the problems such as the cramped passages and the collision, and you get Round Race. Do you see now why this minigame pisses me off more than it should? And I know what you're thinking. Haunted Hallways is a lesser version of Balcony Bolt and you said you liked that minigame. And yes, you're right about that. But at least Haunted Hallways doesn't limit your movement and it's possible to make a comeback at the end if you're lucky.
Come on, duckers!
That doesn't count. The only reason it's so low is that the minigame itself isn't really boring or obnoxious, it just exists. Albeit for the worst reasons, and if it weren't for the existence of Round Race, it would not only escape the list, but the dishonorable mentions as well.
But Bameworth, it's a racing minigame, and everyone's a winner in racing minigames.
Nobody cares!
Don't you worry though, cause now the fun's about to begin. For this next minigame, we must go back in time, to the year 2018. Cube Factory is a team minigame that certainly exists. You press buttons that light up and unpress the ones that don't, and hopefully your team will win. Very middle ground enjoyment, not one of my favorites. But what if I told you that once upon a time, those yellow markers didn't exist? If you hated having to configure the button codes at a rapid pace, just imagine what it was like doing things in the dark. Without the markers to guide you, all you did was randomly press buttons like there's a cockroach dancing on the board and laughing at you, in hopes that your workstation would plop a single cube for your team. Obviously there's no consistency with that, so what's the best option here? Spam the buttons in this sequence so you don't miss any cubes. Over and over and over. And just like the current version, you gotta do this for a minute. It's like the final room in the original Flood Escape, except there you only had 2 codes to find for a single door. This is just working at a packaging unit if all you did was press buttons in the same 24-step pattern for a minute with no breaks. This is Roblox, not Osu. There's really little else I can say about this minigame. There's barely anything to it beyond playing bootleg Sound Voltex for a minute. And this segment is getting repetitive too, which should be a nice segue into the next couple entries. All else I can say is that thank Bilderman we got the yellow markers in the end. Never leave. Please. Once again, we're going back to the classics. A time where certain minigames were flat and had little thought put into them. And in the spotlight for this segment is cloud control. It's no secret to most people here that touch scripts in Roblox are a tad on the wonky side, but really, isn't everything in Roblox? And nowhere else is this more apparent than chasing clouds in hopes you get the last touch. Like Cube Factory, this minigame had a meta that turned what looked like a decent concept on paper into an arduous, repetitive chore. I mean, running after drifting clouds to mark them with your team colors sounds harmless enough, right? Oh, I wasn't kidding when I said the last touch, because only that touch matters. Those guys towards the front may as well be doing nothing but dancing on rainbows. While the ones leaning over the back edge fight over the clouds to the point of jumping out over the pit just to mark them, because there's no limit to how many times their color can change. So it's not uncommon for the more savvy players to bunch together and stink things up even more. Especially in the summit map with this tree that you can stand on, which extends outside of the arena. Just as well there's ground below the ladder, so hopefully there's someone dumb enough to dive after the clouds and waste time. This minigame makes you resent cloud spotting, but thankfully none of that is the case any longer, as now the clouds come through from every direction, meaning your control over them is now much more even across the map. But the real reason it's better now is this. And luckily for me, the next entry won't be an old version of a minigame, so I won't have to scour my hard drives for old footage and can just rely on buying minigames with my money. Whoa, what was that? Oh well, moving on. I'm honestly not a fan of sword fighting minigames. Either I'm just bad or the Roblox melee mechanics hate my guts. Or maybe my character is too tall. Or all three even. That and most of them eliminate you on death. Now that sounds fun, doesn't it? Oh, if only there was a sword minigame where we work together. Ooh, zombie pirates. That sounds like fun. What could possibly go wrong?
I'm going to lick.
Why did I honorably mention this on my old favorites list? Now this might come as an even bigger surprise to some than Downhill Roll, since I previously said that I liked this one. And here I am in the present thinking, why? This minigame is a shining example of a great idea executed horribly. A non-team-based co-op sword fighting minigame where you have to defend yourself and your shipmates from Barbossa's cursed crew is something that could be one of my favorites, if it weren't for one fatal error. The zombie pirates are way too easy to spawn camp. And this is something I even brought up in my old favorites list. And I was just like, yeah, those are some big flaws, but the minigame's still awesome. Whee! Oh! I'm not even kidding when I say that it only takes 2 semi-competent players to shut down a spawn. Because unless your timing is off, the pirates will never harm you enough to kill you. So just imagine how easy it is in large servers. And if you decide to show pity and let them aboard, then you must answer to the absurdly broken range of their cutlasses. If you take on a gang of these bastards, you're dead. It's practically impossible to kill a lone pirate unscathed unless they're distracted. No good deed goes unpunished in this minigame. It's spawn camp or die. I have never encountered another instance where spawn camping is a necessity for winning besides CTF Turbine, especially on hardcore mode. There's clicking on a group of buttons and jumping around spastically, and then there's hugging an invisible wall while clicking M1 every few seconds. We've reached a new low of chronic repetition for this game. God, if I talk about these minigames any longer, I'm gonna go mad. I need a refresh. Are those my old pants? Once more, let us look into the past, to the creation of certain minigames that have now changed for the better. Prior to 2022, event minigames would either come and go or become mainstays. But then, as of recently, certain holiday-themed minigames were moved into a new category known as seasonal minigames, only appearing among the selection during the appropriate season. And one of those minigames was Collection Contention. More like Collection Contempt. Shin. A lot of you newcomers might be more familiar with the revamped version you all played during Christmas last year. And let me tell you, that version is a true holiday gift coming out of the pile of charcoal that I had to deal with. I've taken a couple of jabs at this minigame in the past, and quite frankly, I feel those were scratching the surface of the problems with this mess, so it's about time I did it justice. So you're probably all wondering how running towards falling presents could be so infuriating just from looking at the footage on screen. Well, apparently the devs didn't want to repeat cloud control, so they pulled a big brain and made every player collidable. The result was players mushing together to try and nab the presents with no consistent way to ensure your total going up unless your Robloxian towers over everyone else's. Yes, you had to alter your avatar to your advantage to make things more bearable. At least in Undead Aboard you had a choice to make things interesting and still win. Here, it's borderline mandatory if you wanted to make things fair. Really? Unless your character is taller, there's no point in targeting a present when someone is closer to it than you are because the odds generally favor the first player under the drop zone. A mechanic to push players out of the way would have been nice, especially since the default physics engine hates me for some reason and thinks I weigh as much as a clear wipe. And then there's the special rounds. There are 3 of them, and they have various effects on the experience. The speed rounds are arguably the best of the 3 since you're more likely to catch presents no one else is waiting for. Bomb rounds drop Take a Guess, which straight up eliminate you if you get caught in their blast, which is either worse or better depending on how you think about it. But neither of those two hold a candle to the absolute terror of
Everything's gone bloody crazy!
the ice rounds. The fucking ice rounds. You thought catching the presents was frustrating enough? Now try accomplishing that with ice physics. Ice physics that send you flying all over the place, bouncing off players like a pinball, and having as much control over it as a tank on grease. It is beyond insufferable. Normally for this list, I would rank the boring, repetitive ones higher than the ones that are just frustrating, since those ones I can at least express my annoyance towards, but this one is on a level of contemptuousness so much higher than those that I couldn't rank it any lower than this. Give me the present version of this minigame any day, where the camera is no longer fixed and the bombs along with other hazards only make you drop your items. Hopefully this is the last time I will roast this old minigame. You could even say I roasted it on an open fire. Next minigame.
This sucks.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a good build-up for this entry, so there. Hedgeway Out still sucks. I've always been a sucker for hedge mazes and other related puzzles, but this one just leaves me begging for the apocalypse to come and step on me. If by any means you found the likes of Cube Factory, Cloud Control, or even Undead Aboard 2 active for yourself, then look no further than Hedgeway Out, where you move through squares in a transforming maze at a pace even Flash would fall asleep to. And this wouldn't be so bad if every wall wasn't wasn't solid every time the maze reconfigures. Who thought this was an acceptable design choice? The closing walls should not become collidable the moment they fade into existence. That gives players absolutely no time to escape being trapped. It is stupidly easy to find yourself in a situation where you're stuck in the same area from multiple transformations, only to end up stuck in another area for a similar amount of time, at which point you might as well just accept fate. You have no idea how miserable it is to walk out a couple squares from the center only to get trapped in a single square long enough to deny your victory, while the random number gods are looking down at you and laughing at your misfortune. And this happens way more often than you think, and it generally is this bad, and is another example of how making things collidable often leads to disaster. On the other hand, if they decide to show some compassion, as rare as it seems, you can beat the minigame in less than 20 seconds, like the RNG mess it is. And the worst part about all this is that this minigame can actually work, and it can be fixed easily, just by making these situations easier to escape, by either making the walls collidable only when their transparency is 0, or at the very least give us some kind of signal that they're about to change. Hell, make the maze bigger, why don't you, if you fear that'll be too easy otherwise. I know I expressed my desire to fix this minigame 4 years ago, but this minigame is just so close to being good, and yet so far. Much like Undead Aboard. There's really not much else I can say here except I think I need my internet checked. Oh well, next entry. Luck-based minigames are a bit of a nuisance in any collection of minigames, and Epic Minigames is no stranger to those. Having typically less than a 50% chance of winning with little to no actual skill involved isn't exactly everyone's idea of fun. Not all of them are bad though. I don't mind the ones that have some action to them and or feel like you have some control over the odds, like Balcony Boat, Crumble Island, or Desert Dehydration. At least back when it was easier to hoard the cans. But keeping with the theme of this list, we're talking about those mini-games. The ones that are so one-note and simplistic in design that you just gaze 1,000 yards into the distance whenever you play them, and end up sulking like a COD player when you inevitably lose. Where do I begin with this topic? How about cake delivery? The one that you can either beat in 5 seconds or spend the whole 30 scouring the map for the one door that was probably right next to you at the beginning. Cause Murphy is in there enforcing his law upon you. No matter the outcome, all you're doing is walking around looking for a number among 30 plus doors that instantly wins you the minigame. And don't get me started on the 2D map. But if that's too much running for you, look no further than Crystal Clear, where we stand in one spot in the map and do nothing while waiting for a crystal to teleport us out. Because actually running for the crystals is like chasing a legendary Pokemon. You ain't gonna get it without Lady Luck's intervention.
I should kick your fucking ass!
And it's been well established that I hate minigames that force me to adopt a boring playstyle for the best chances at winning, especially in the pro version. But if you don't like sharing and want to be the sole victor, head down to Manic Mining, where the most manic thing here is the odds of winning. Every player in the server, 1 block of emerald, sometimes only a stone's throw away. And if you thought the original map was bad, get a load of the Mystic map, which has 2 areas to dig through but still only 1 block, so there's a 50-50 chance you'd be digging for jack shit. Far and away my minigame with the lowest win rate. Just as well that it ends the quickest. And then we got the newest member of the gang. Big Bum Bingly Bongly Barbie Babki Bibdi Bobbidi Boom! Essentially Russian roulette, but instead of a revolver, you have a big ball of
Plasma!
linked to 5 detonators, you don't have to pay 20 pieces of gold, and it's only lethal to your character. And once someone picks the real detonator, the game state resets with a different bomb trigger and repeats until 1 player remains. Many players hate this minigame for taking ages to complete, and that's with everyone divided into groups of 4. Could you imagine if everyone was in the same room? If that happened, I would personally buy myself a Diamondback and play Russian roulette with a full clip. And to think that it could have been worse than what we got. But of course, we can't talk about luck-based minigames without mentioning the crowning jewel of them all. 4 corners. This is as basic and dull as a luck-based minigame can get. Pick your corner, watch the unlucky players die, laugh at their misfortune, and repeat 3 times with barely over a 30% chance of winning. Sure, 75% each round sounds favorable, but with 4 rounds you need to survive, your luck will run out surprisingly fast. And remember this little tidbit from my previous video?
But Baneworth, if you go to the corner that was chosen last time, you're more likely to win.
Yeah, the random number gods would like a word with you. And if you thought things couldn't get any worse, the dock version has insta-kill water surrounding this teeny tiny little island. So if you're not careful, you won't even get your chance to win. This is peak game design, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing can top this. In all seriousness, this is one of the few minigames I genuinely think the place is better off without. Because if you were to fix every problem present, the minigame would be completely different and unrecognizable. And you know all those videos by other players winning all those minigames? This is the shit they had to suffer through. These minigames by themselves gave me barely anything to write about because they're so one-dimensional in gameplay and concept. Which is why I ranked Hedgeway Out above all of them, because it at least gives me enough stuff to rant about for its own segment. With all that said, you're probably all wondering which of these minigames I'm placing here. The answer? All of them. They're all a huge thorn in this game's collection and ultimately boil down to the same dilemma. Though if you're all wondering how I'd actually order these within this segment, here you go. Now, only one question remains. What could be worse than the luck-based mini-games? Turntable Scurry. Slow-paced maze minigame like Hedgeway Out. Unlike Hedgeway Out, it's pathetically easy to win because of the lack of actual dead ends and variation with the turntables. Unless you have the luck of Jerry Pinkman. High Pressure. Also slow-paced with little options to kill wary players and the only slight indication of steam being no longer deadly being practically impossible to notice when the controller presses the valve so rapidly, making things unbearably awkward. And sometimes it straight up doesn't work.
Come on, Cartman, fart!
Bombastic Bash. Looks fun on paper, but in reality is just moving up and down, pressing buttons, and hoping you take less hits than the opposing team. Especially when 2 players on the same line start mashing. Freeze a Fray. Painfully slow projectiles drawing out the minigame and turning the fight into an Atella Brothers disco with unlucky players getting hit every few moments and enemy players camping frozen teammates. And thawing teammates takes way too fucking long. OG King of the Hill. You know the saying, nice guys finish last? Well, this minigame begs to differ. When you're pitted against one another with overly large hammers that make it hard to see who you're pounding, with knockback that would impress God's hand, it honestly makes more sense just to avoid the conflict entirely. Nothing. Yep, there's nothing in this game worse than the luck-based minigames that appears all year round. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed the video, so wait, what? What is that? Oh my god, no! No, get that thing away from me! It lives. Okay, so picture this. It's 2019. You visit your favorite games that are hosting an event tied to the death of Egg Hunt scrambled in time. Not because you're a big enough sucker to actually play the shitty event, but because you're interested in the stuff brought to the games you visited. One of which I sort of made a video on at the time.
Achievement unlocked.
You go to Epic Minigames and everything seems pretty normal, but then you see it. The worst minigame ever devised. Easter Ice Thaw. I'm being completely honest when I say that the moment I entered the ice rink, in a stark contrast to Revolution Cube, I could tell this was going to be a massive shit show. And even then, it far exceeded my expectations of shittiness. I'm not even being that unrealistic when I say that this is the one versus minigame that you can win by doing absolutely nothing. For those who have never seen this minigame, I envy you. The goal is to push the ice cube that appears in the center into your zone and make sure it stays there when time runs out. Pretty simple, huh? if you've been listening to what I've been saying, you'd probably have guessed that this minigame is yet another victim to the default physics of Roblox, combined with the fact that the devs couldn't be bothered to add a push mechanic to their seasonal minigames. So what you get is every player pushing the ice cube from literally every direction with even less control over the odds than Four Corners and Big Bomb Boom. Let me repeat that. You have less control over the outcome than the 100% luck minigames. At least all the minigames at the number 2 spot required you to make decisions. Here, ha! The only decision here that matters is that of the cube, when it decides enough is enough and picks a winner for itself in a fit of Roblox physics. And the devs realized they fucked up this minigame because less than 2 weeks after release, they added 2 extra cubes to the mix, which, I'm not gonna lie, actually did a decent job at dividing players and making things feel less than pure luck, and now it looks, dare I say, bearable. For a luck-based minigame anyway, but anyone unfortunate enough to witness this at its apex will never forget. And for me especially, it was too late, as Lady Luck pointed towards my zone before the minigame was changed.
Oh, cool, I won.
Easter Ice Thaw is an all-time low, not just for epic minigames, but in my opinion, Roblox minigames in general. I've seen a fair share of shitty minigames in my time outside of epic minigames that essentially boil down to dumb luck, but not to the extent that literally none of your actions matter in the slightest. And unlike Four Corners and its brethren, this was not the intention. There is no other minigame that I know of that fails this hard, and that's why Easter Ice Thaw is my pick for the worst epic minigame of all time. And yet, even after all that, that's still not the end of it. This minigame is the reason I chose to remake this list. They brought it back for Easter last year, and I went into this project thinking it would return again so I could relive the utter despair myself for my viewers. But you didn't do that, Typical Games. No, instead you just reskinned 2 pre-existing minigames, one of which was already done, and the other was already a seasonal minigame. Though to be fair, after what I've said, it probably wouldn't have done much to reinforce my point in its current state. But I'm still fucking pissed that I timed the production of this video with Easter and not get the minigame titled Easter Ice Thaw! Good job, Typical Games. Good job. Well, with that said, this saga has finally come to a close. I've said everything I could about these minigames and have no more plans for them. It's all over. Honestly, when this story began in 2017, I had no idea it would span almost 6 years, with each installment being some of my most popular works. And now with this out of the way, I can focus on bringing some other stories to a close. And as a little trinket for being so patient, here is another sneak peek at the FE2 maps list. And there's plenty more stuff that'll make you cautious like you're trying to get over it. I hope you all enjoyed the video and aren't too salty about some of my choices, so until next time, Baneworth out.